On your Tuesday episode of Locked On Raptors, we return from the All-Star break with the three most exciting words in Toronto Raptors podcasting. It's what's more likely.
You are Locked On Raptors, your daily Toronto Raptors podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey! What's going on? And welcome to another episode of Locked On Raptors, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is Tuesday, February the 18th, and I'm your host, Sean Woodley. I've been covering the Toronto Raptors now for 11 seasons on various platforms. You can find all my work over on Blue Sky. You can also find the show on Instagram, and you can join us in the Locked On Raptors Discord server. Link in the description of the podcast. Whole lot of great pictures of snow from the weekend. People shoveling, people tractoring, people breaking up ice in their driveways. It's a wonderful little community we got where even during the All-Star break, we're talking about our lives because we're all pals in the Discord. Come be a pal. Link in the description of the podcast. Free to join as always. You can also subscribe for free to the daily Locked On Raptors newsletter. You get words from me 5 days a week. You get Katie Heindel 4 times a week talking about the league at large. You get Michael Shearer, who's going to be on tomorrow's podcast every Thursday with basketball poetry breakdowns. It's a great thing. Again, it costs $0. All you got to do is go to the QR code on the screen or the link in the description of the podcast if you're listening on audio, and go subscribe at the link. It's much appreciated when you do it. All right, on today's show, it's the All-Star break still. We're still waiting for the Raptors to get back in action on Friday against the Miami Heat, and so we're going to fill some time with one of our favorite little parlor games here. It's What's More Likely. I lay out 2 pretty unlikely scenarios, and we talk about which of the 2 pretty unlikely scenarios is the most likely to hold and actually happen in the future. And here to play another round of What's More Likely is our pal getting set to go on vacation somewhere warm for the last time for a couple weeks. It's Big V, Vivek Jacob from Raptors in 7 and Sportsnet. Big V, how the hell are you, pal?
I'm doing great. Like you said, man, looking forward to vacay, looking forward to getting away from this snow. Yeah, I can't wait.
I don't know if you can see it. I'm just cut from all of my lifting of snow over the weekend. The big, strong lad. I had to push my neighbor's car out of the driveway this morning. Always feels good when you can push a car out of a driveway.
Easy there,
like the freaking Hulk. Yeah. Superman, the Hulk, whatever, same diff. Either way, Big V, we're here to play What's More Likely. We've got questions pertaining to the Raptors' position in the NBA standings going in to the stretch run of the season. We're going to talk a little about the 2-guard spot for the future, but let's begin with the first What's More Likely I got for you. What's more likely, Big V, next season your 2025-26 Toronto Raptors have 2 representatives at the All-Star game, or 0? What you got? What's more likely? And if you do have 2 on your list, who are those 2? It's maybe not a surprise, but what you got?
So I do think 2 is more likely than 0, just by virtue of the fact that I do think I would expect to see 1. And so if you get to 1, what's more likely? 2. So yeah, in terms of who the 2 would be, I would say, Scottie and Brandon Ingram. I think they would be the key to, getting to a level of wins that would, get you 2 All-Stars. As you said, you've presented 2 scenarios that are pretty unlikely. And so when you look at, who's had multiple All-Stars from the East this year, Cleveland, is it possible they go from, having 3 guys to 2? Yeah, I could see that. Sure. Is it possible for New York to lose 2? I think that's unlikely, with Brunson and Cat, like barring injury. And so I think that's where maybe the difficulties start to present itself. But in terms of what's more likely, I think 2 is more likely than 0.
Yeah, I am with you as well. Look, they got 2 guys on the team who have been there before. Yes, they were both injury replacements when they made it. And yes, Brandon Ingram hasn't made an All-Star team since 2019-20 when he won Most Improved Player and had his big breakout. He's also been playing in the Western Conference for a kind of mid-team for the bulk of his career. And so, I think in the Eastern Conference, certainly it's a little more gettable for a guy like Ingram. This all to me just comes down to how good do you think the Raptors are going to be? because usually if you have 2 all-stars, it means you're at least like a top 4 or 5 seed at the very worst. And so, I think this team has the juice to be a playoff team. I wrote about this on Friday for Toxic Positivity Friday, and I wasn't just being toxically positive. I think I was just looking at the team as it is and looking at the assemblage of talent. And no, they're not loaded with top 10 guys or anything like that, but just like some of its parts, a collection of pretty good players with a couple of all-star level dudes kind of guiding the ship, that can totally be a playoff team. And if they can get out to a hot start, maybe be darlings of the NBA Cup or something like that and kind of put themselves into the zeitgeist a little more than they are this year, I certainly think it's possible that 2 will be there. And yeah, I would agree. It feels like Scottie Barnes, next year, once the team is presumably back to being relevant and winning games again, it feels like it's going to set up a run for him to just kind of make a bunch of all-star teams here. You're looking at the team from this past year. Damian Lillard, how long is he going to be making all-star teams? We'll see what the Bucks even are next season. I think that spot's vulnerable. Tyler Hero, he's been awesome this season. What will the Heat be going forward? Can Tyler Hero, is he in the midst of his best season ever? It's very possible. He's been unbelievable this year, and he's never been this unbelievable before. Maybe this doesn't sustain. Trae Young, I always scoff at Trae Young, the classic injury replacement guy, who just always seems to be getting in at the final hour. I'm not worried about that. I think Scottie Barnes is a more impactful, better player than Trae Young, all things being equal as well, the team records being similar or whatever. And so, yeah, I think Scottie Barnes with his two-way impact is certainly, that's like a coach-ass pick too. If you're assembling the teams, a guy who plays really good defense is going to be someone I think that a lot of coaches look at. Ingram's a little more interesting. I would bet against him making the All-Star game. I think you're totally right. It's probably just one, but I don't know. He could totally put up numbers on this team that are in line with being an all-star. Let me ask you that. If you had to just kind of guess right now at what Brandon Ingram's just raw box score line is going to be next year, I think you probably bake in a slight uptick in efficiency just because of the way the Raptors play offense and the quality of the looks they get. But in terms of just pure numbers, that's usually what's going to get you into the all-star game or not. Do you see, 24 a game, 25 a game, or do you think it'll be more sort of a piece of this egalitarian system the Raptors have where it's hard for him to put up numbers that get him into that all-star conversation, especially if the defense doesn't match what Scottie Barnes does, for example?
No, I think this team is going to look to put him in positions to score. I think they want to sort of really invest in that identity of his, right? And I think when Bobby says, hey, Brandon likes to score the ball, I think they want someone with kind of that oomph and that X factor on the offensive end where it's like, hey, shot clock's winding down, get me the ball, I'll get us a good shot, or at least what's a good shot for me, because we know he takes some tough shots
for my very tall ass. Yeah.
So I think from that standpoint, I could see him averaging 24 a game, and throw in 6 boards, 5 assists. Maybe assists move down a little bit just because Quickly and Scottie and maybe even Yak have the ball in terms of setting things up. But I think if I had to pick right now, I'd probably go somewhere in the neighborhood of 24, 6 and 5. And if the Raptors are winning coming to the All-Star break, that would put him in position, I think, along with Scottie, to be there.
Sure. Yeah. I think I'd probably go a little lower than that. It's been a while since he was up near 24, 25 a game. Couple seasons now, 2023, 24 was the last time he was there at 24.7, which was a career high. I would probably put it at 22 and a half, I guess, would be where I kind of pencil it in. And maybe that gets him in, maybe it doesn't. We'll see what the assist totals are like. Again, I think it's most likely Scottie just makes it. But yeah, how surprised would you be if they had none next year? Would this be kind of understandable, or do you think the team is going to be good enough with Ingram, with the internal growth that's likely to happen from the wave of bench dudes, with whoever they draft coming up, which we'll get into a little bit later on, sort of tangentially? What are your sort of if you had to sort of take your 2, your 1, or your 0 all-stars, how would you put that into the pie chart of probabilities?
Yeah, so I think based on what I said, I'd say 1, then 2, and then 0. So I would be pretty surprised with 0. The X factor is always going to be injuries and health. I think the reason why I lean towards 1 is because I expect the Raptors to be pretty good next year. And so I think, when you look at, Atlanta being under 500 and having Trae there, you look at, Miami being under 500 and having Tyler Hero there, it's like, why not? Like, I think Vucevic had a really good year, but the Bulls are like 10 games below 500. So I don't expect the Raptors to be that bad. So yeah, I expect the Raptors to be a decent amount above 500, close to the All-Star break next year. And so I think that is where, I'd be surprised if it ended up with 0. The X factor in all this is you also look at the fact that, injuries did play a factor this year. And so, I think if it weren't for injuries, Orlando might have had a case for 2 All-Stars.
Right.
And so I think that stuff we'll have to see how it plays out. Does Tyrese Halliburton get back in the mix next year? And so that stuff is going to be interesting. Again, the most likely scenario is just the 1. And, feeling a little confident and, feel like puffing my chest out after the Brandon Ingram acquisition. So why not roll with 2 instead of 0?
Hell yeah. Why the hell not, indeed? I think I'm with you. I would be pretty surprised if there are none next year. Scottie Barnes really good. And I think he's going to be in a position to be even better, kind of at his best, not having to, take a bunch of pull up, catch and shoot, or pull up threes above the break because he's the only thing that, going in the entire offense at any point. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how all the dynamics work for sure. But I think we're in agreement there. We're going to come back on the other side, and I'm not sure we're going to agree so much on the next one, as we are going to get into, speaking of the Bulls being bad, are they so bad that the Raptors might catch them? Oh, no. You might shudder to think about it. We'll get to that coming up in just 1 second. Today's show is brought to you by TurboTax. Intuit TurboTax, that is. Taxes, they're a thing where you're waiting, you're wondering, you're worrying. And I, as a freelancer my entire life, always hate taxes. I'm always pushing it to the last minute, always just kind of like, do I have to do this? Really? Obviously, you got to do your taxes. And with TurboTax, there's no more waiting, wondering, and worrying. Taxes Now is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return while you get a real-time update on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find you every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. All so you can get the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. This is taxes. Get an expert now at turbotax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service, real-time updates only in the iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at turbotax.com/guarantees. Back at it here with Big V, Vivek Jacob from Raptors in 7 and Sportsnet. He's got his mic muted. There, he fixed it. We love it as we continue our What's More Likely round here on a Tuesday. The next one I've got for you here, Big V, it's going to stress some people out. It's going to make people very anxious, I think. And me, as a recently converted member of Team Tank, it's stressing me out a little bit too. The Toronto Raptors right now currently sit 5th in the NBA draft lottery odds. My what's more likely question for you is, what's more likely? The Toronto Raptors finish exactly 5th in the lottery odds, or they accidentally catch the Bulls and make the play-in? I ask this because the Toronto Raptors have by far the easiest schedule in the NBA down the stretch. Their remaining strength of schedule, just by pure winning percentage of their opponents, is 39.8, 398, under 400, really bad. The next team on the list with the lowest opposing record on their strength of schedule is the Washington Wizards with a 447 opposing record. So the Raptors, far and away the easiest schedule left. 3 games against the Wizards, 2 against the Jazz, 2 against the Hornets, 2 against the Nets, 2 against the Bulls, 2 against the Sixers. Are you scared, Big V? What's more likely? They accidentally move into 10th without even wanting to, or they stay where they are, cushy in 5th in the lottery odds?
It's definitely not ideal. I will say that.
What happened with the schedule, man?
But what I will say is I think the Raptors at this stage are just in too deep to try and back out of this strategy. And I think the front office has made it perfectly clear on what the goal is for this season. And, even in addressing the Brandon Ingram acquisition, Bobby Webster was pretty clear that, hey, this is still a rebuild. We don't think Ingram impacts what's going to happen down the stretch here. And so I think they will find ways to make things difficult against these easier opponents. And yeah, I do think the fifth best odds are probably more likely than backing their way into 10th.
I wish I could agree with you here, man. And I don't think the Raptors want this, by the way. Like, I think they've stated it pretty clearly. Like, we are trying to lose games. Bobby Webster has literally said on the radio, pray to the lottery gods. Like, we know what the plan and intention is here, but, best laid plans often go awry. And that happens when the back of your schedule is basically a bunch of G League teams. I am concerned that the Raptors, try as they might have too many competent players on the roster to lose to your Wizards and Jazz and Hornets and Nets enough to stay cushioned in that fifth spot. And look, I am ultimately like not that concerned if they're like sixth, seventh, eighth. It's a flattened lottery world. All of this is most likely to lead in despair and upset, and it's just not. You're banking on the lottery to save you is always a fool's errand. But I do think that just by proxy of playing against these horrible teams, they might just happen into enough wins to sneak into that 10th spot and really piss a lot of people off. Even if they do that, they'll still have like the 9th best odds overall with the way the standings currently sit, in the Western Conference being obviously better. So it's not the end of the world unless they go and win the play-in, and then they're in, a 1-8 and get smacked by the Cavs. And, that'll be fun for some people. And I wouldn't hate it necessarily in a vacuum, but we don't live in a vacuum. And so, it would probably hurt some feelings if that were to take place. I just think, like, what's the formula here? Because these teams are also going to be trying to lose real hard. Like, they're not going to be throwing out their best lineups. They're already the Wizards don't have best lineups to throw out. Yes, they traded Kyle Kuzma, so they're probably better now, but they don't have a hope in hell. The Jazz have not been trying for 3 months at this point. They're pros at this. The Hornets are terrible, injured, and terrible. What do you think needs these games against these teams need to look like in terms of who's playing, how many minutes are they playing, and how shameless can the Raptors get here? If we're going to go to the sort of court of tank ethics, how unethical will they need to be to actually lose these games against these horrible teams who are also trying to lose?
Yeah, so I think the first step is, Jakob Poeltl needs to be dealing with that hip pointer a lot. That's going to be part one. Maybe RJ's shoulder is nagging at him a little bit more down the stretch here. Maybe Quickly's elbow, is just feeling a little off.
Scottie threw out his back shoveling. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Scottie's got to walk his dogs.
Mm-hmm.
Or might have, slipped on some ice. Might need to take care of it. Take care of it for a month.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's kind of the path. It is what it is. Yeah, and again, I don't see a path to the Raptors getting into the bottom four. I think if there's people looking for that to happen, I think that is very unlikely. I just think that between Washington, New Orleans, Utah, and Charlotte, that bottom four is kind of set in stone. Brooklyn has been winning more than people would have expected, and you hope that Jordi Fernandez is doing one last favor for Canada and just keeps that going. Philly, I think, is kind of an X factor in this. It's hey, do they decide that they just don't want to give the pick to Oklahoma City and that this is going to be a lost season? So we're just going to have Embiid and Paul George sit out the rest of the way and let them get healthy, and we're just going to go full tank. Is that, that might be an X factor in all this. Obviously, Chicago's lost, was it 4 or 5 in a row? And
4 in a row, yeah.
And they're coming off the Zach LaVine trade. So, that pressure is going to be there in terms of teams falling off potentially. But I think the Raptors at this stage, 21 games below 500, they've just got to find a way to close it out. Yeah. And the first part of that is hey, man, you just got to find a way to lose pretty much 7 straight here coming out of the break.
Right. Yeah.
Miami,
Heat, Suns,
Boston.
Celtics, Pacers. There's a Bulls game in there. Gotta lose
Yeah,
that
but it's
one.
on the road. You
Full of
can find a
magic.
way.
Yeah. Mhm.
And then you got back-to-back against Orlando. So I think, you lose 7 straight right there. I think that'll help you going down the way. And like Portland's been winning more than they needed to either. So hopefully they can keep that going too.
Yeah, correction. As it stands right now, the Bulls, currently 10th in the East, are 8th in the lottery standings. And so, 8th could be where you end up, even if you end up in that 9-10 and losing the play-in. So I guess that's not the end of the world, but, you have a 26.3% chance at top 4, a 6% chance at number 1. You could be in a worse spot for sure. Teams have climbed up from 8, and it's happened quite routinely, if I recall. I think the Raptors were 8th when they got Bargnani, were they not? Either way. If we're bringing back fun lottery memories of the past, I just think like it's going to require like Raptors Jazz. Jacoby Walter plays like 42 minutes, takes 36 shots, and they still might win. Like, like the Jazz are terrible. I think it's more likely they end up in the 10 seed than if they do stick in 5. As much as they don't want to, like the other teams around them are just going to be trying as hard or harder to suck. And like I think the Sixers just kind of like it's been decided for them. They've got to pack it in. They're in the 6th best odds right now. It's their best shot of actually keeping the pick. Whether you give the 7th or the 11th pick to the Thunder shouldn't really matter if you're the Sixers. You should just try to keep your pick, I guess. But like it feels like they're going to be kind of tumbling down. The nice thing is there is a bit of a cushion loss column wise. The Raptors have 38 losses right now. Bulls have 33. Philly and Brooklyn both have 34. So that's still quite a gap to make up over 27 remaining games for the Raptors. But I don't know, man. It's going to be some stinky performance art, stinky basketball down the stretch. And I'm actually kind of excited for it, like a little pervert, because I think it's going to be just like an interesting sort of like case study to observe. But yeah, prepare for a lot of Ulrich Champche if you really want to stay in 5th. I think it's what we're going to be looking at here. We'll come back on the other side here, Big V, and get into our final What's More Likely. We'll look ahead to next season once again, and in particular, the 2-guard spot. Who's in that spot? There's more than just 2 options for this What's More Likely. A surprise. We'll get to that to close things out in just a sec. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at Hungry Root. When it comes to grocery shopping and meal planning, got this ongoing problem. I just don't have the damn time between work, life, trying to eat healthier, and constantly feeling stressed out. Like, oh God, I got to eat food. I got to be nutritious. I got to put the good, right things in my body. And it's just really hard to do. It's really hard to stick to any health goals with all of that. But everything changed when I discovered Hungry Root. Honestly, game changer. It's the easiest way to eat healthy without all the stress. With Hungry Root, it's like having a personal shopper and a nutritionist all in one. They take care of your grocery shopping, recommending meals and groceries based on your taste and health goals, from anti-inflammatory to high protein and gluten-free options. And the best part, every meal is ready in 15 minutes or less. We love to hear that. Talking quick, healthy meals that actually taste great, all delivered straight to your door. It's been a huge time saver for anyone who's done it, and you can be among those people as well. You're going to love Hungry Root. For a limited time, get 40% off your first box and a free item in every box for life. Just go to hungryroot.com/LockedOnNBA to use the code LockedOnNBA. That's hungryroot.com/LockedOnNBA, code LockedOnNBA to get 40% off your first box and a free item of your choice for life. That's huge. You never have to buy spinach again. hungryroot.com/LockedOnNBA, code LockedOnNBA. Don't miss out. Wrapping up our What's More Likely Tuesday edition of Locked On Raptors with our pal, Big V, Vivek Jacob, to talk about next year and the 2-guard spot. And this one is a bit of an open-ended What's More Likely. There's one side of things that's clear and concrete. The other side, very much up to interpretation. So let's get to it. What's more likely here, Big V? The starting shooting guard of the next Toronto Raptors playoff team is RJ Barrett or someone else. It could be anybody in the world. You're probably talking about one of 3 guys, but it could be anyone in the world. RJ Barrett or anyone in the world. Who you got as the next playoff-bound Toronto Raptors starting shooting guard?
Yeah, so I think this is a really interesting question because
thank you. I wrote it myself.
But because I think we're looking at a scenario where the Raptors are in the playoffs next season. So it's like, hey, does RJ get traded this summer? Does he get traded before the next trade deadline.
Is he the sixth man and not starting at all, but still on the team?
Exactly. Is he the sixth man? So I think that part of it is really interesting. I think if the Raptors end up with a top 2, maybe even top 3 pick, I would probably go with him not being the shooting guard. And I think beyond that as well, the fact that he's extension eligible, I think the Raptors can afford to play hardball a little bit and be like, hey, this is where we're at with the roster, the salary cap, the tax situation. And so this is what we feel is a fair number. You can take it, or, we feel pretty comfortable moving on too. And so with all that being said, I will go with RJ Barrett being the shooting guard.
Okay. A little big switch. All right.
I think ultimately, if there's a move made, I think it will come the next summer. So not the one coming up right now. I think it'll come after, because I think they've put themselves in a position to still skirt around the tax. And I think they might even see, a more presentable trade scenario if they can be like, hey man, RJ helped us have this success. We went to the playoffs with him. He was our starting shooting guard, as opposed to, maybe a guy that some GMs might still look at and say, oh yeah, okay, those numbers are great, but you guys were pretty bad.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I really struggle with this one, and there's lots of layers to it, right? Like, sentimentally, it kind of sucks that, like, you get our Ingram and it's like, oh, RJ's next to go. Because, like, it's very cool that RJ Barrett has been this good for the Raptors and that he seems to be so thrilled to be playing this well for the Raptors. But, it is what it is in the modern NBA with the CBA and everything. I genuinely don't think the Raptors want to trade RJ Barrett, and I would bet against them trading him this summer. Totally could happen. It's absolutely on the table, especially like you mentioned, if they end up with a top 3 pick, the money gets a lot more squeezy, within the tax. I also just think they might just pay the tax. Like, it could happen. You can go into the season being over the tax and find a way to get out by the deadline. I think.
Betting on the Rodgers to spend money. That's a heck of a day to choose it.
You don't actually pay the money until after is the thing. Yeah, great day to pick that, by the way. Shout out. Really good baseball team that does good things spending money well. We love it. God, don't get me started on the Vlad thing. We'll do that another time. But like, you don't have to actually pay the tax until the end of the season. Like, that's when the bill comes due. And so the front office that is all about flexibility and options, I think they keep the most flexibility and options if they just keep RJ into the season, hang out over the tax a little bit, and then by the deadline, see where you're at. If they're not a good team, then maybe that's where you find a way to offload RJ, get under the tax, and kind of reevaluate things there, rebalance the roster. If you can get a couple of sort of depth pieces back for him, something like that. Or, maybe you get through this season and he's played extremely well and the team is on track for the playoffs. You feel all right paying the tax. And like you mentioned, in the summer, all of a sudden, all these different options open up where it's RJ. Maybe you package RJ with Emmanuel quickly or something for a big fish or something like that. I just think they have way more options if they keep RJ into the season and kind of see where it takes them from there. And I don't know, where are you at with the whole fit thing with RJ, Ingram, Scottie as the 2, 3, 4? I know there's some concern about it. I think that concern is maybe born from a place that views RJ Barrett as a different player than he is right now. Like, I think there's still this impression of RJ Barrett as this guy who has the ball a ton, needs the ball in his hands to do stuff. And I just don't think that's really what he is as a player anymore. I don't think it's really been what he's been for over a year. He was what Scottie Barnes was hurt earlier this season. But other than that, he's been mostly like an off-ball finisher type, low touch time, quick, direct decision-making when he does get the ball, eager to take catch and shoots. Like, I think that can fit with Ingram and Scottie, even if the three-point shooting juice across the board is maybe not exactly where you'd want it to be. I don't know. What's your read on the fit there?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a perfect fit. I don't think it's an ideal fit, but I think it's a workable fit.
Yeah. That's a great word for it. Yeah.
And so I do think, you sort of lean more into RJ just being this guy who is, coming off pin down screens and just like slashing towards the rim, getting the ball off cuts, and you're really kind of you'd probably be taking away from his playmaking in this type of
Hmm.
fit,
Hmm.
and just having him again more of a catch and shoot guy, and just exclusively almost as a play finisher, I would say, on the offensive end.
Hmm.
And then yeah, you really, with that being said, taking away kind of that heavy load of playmaking and whatnot, you'd probably want to see more of a buy-in on the defensive end and
Hmm.
really challenge him on that end of the floor. And then yeah, again, I feel like the Raptors are in a good position with him where they can play a bit of hardball and be like, hey, like we have options at this position. We really
Hmm.
need you to take it up a notch on the defensive side of the ball. And if you can show that next season, then maybe we can see a path here.
Yeah. Not to go and pull a big V bait and switch myself, but after laying out all the reasons why, I think the Raptors want to keep RJ around and reasons why he probably should be around, I actually think it's the other thing. I think someone else will be the starting two guard for this team when they make the playoffs. I think the options for them to potentially move him next year, the deadline, plus the ability for them to move him this summer and kind of get ahead of it, or the chance that he just becomes the sixth man on this team, which again, like that's going to be a tough conversation, but I think, adults can be reasonable. And I think there's a case to lay out for RJ. Like, hey man, like you can go and be a guy who goes and wins sixth man of the year for us. Like that's 100% very possible if you are the sixth man for this team. Maybe Ochai Abaji starts in his place, Grady Dick, if you want more shooting. And you're all right to kind of concede the defense. You think Scottie and Yak with Ingram's length can provide enough basis for your defense. Like there's ways to go and work it. There's all kinds of options. Jacoby Walter down the line, maybe not next season, certainly going to throw his name into that conversation as well. I just think there are more ways this goes where RJ's not the starting two guard a year from now, when hopefully the team is pushing towards the playoffs, than, things that lead him towards that. So I'll go opposite of you and say, it's someone else. It's someone else in the entire world as opposed to RJ as the two guard, but I don't feel great about it. I think it's a very interesting sort of 50-50 proposition. And there's all kinds of ways this one can go. And it's one of those good problems, right? Like, oh no, we have too many good players. What are we going to do? Our arms are overflowing with all these good players. How are we ever going to sort this all out? I'm sure they will, whether they do it this summer or a later date remains to be seen. But yeah, I'm going to go someone other than RJ as the starting two guard the next time they make the playoffs, which hopefully is next season. Big V. We'll leave it there. Thank you so much for rocking with the show as always. Do you have anything you want to promote for the good people out there?
Usual stuff. Raptors in 7. I actually am putting together kind of 10 storylines to watch over the unofficial second half of the season as we get into
Nice.
that here post All Stars. You can check that out at Basketball Insiders, and you can find all of it on Twitter or Blue Sky at Vivek M. Jacob.
Hell yeah, dude. We'll see you in a couple of weeks when you're back from vacation. Have a wonderful time away
Thank you.
and enjoy not being in this frigid hellscape that we call home for a little while. Of course, you can follow, subscribe, rate, review, go to the newsletter, QR code on the screen, link in the description of the podcast. Much appreciated when you support the newsletter. And of course, join the Discord server, link also in the description of the podcast. Also 100% free to join. We're just handing out free stuff here. We're like Costco, baby. Just handing out samples of stuff, except it's way more than samples, baby. It's a long-term commitment if you're going to join the Discord or the newsletter. And please do it. It's much appreciated. Again, low price of On the House for both. We'll be back again on Wednesdays. Michael Shearer, Basketball Poetry's writer. Of course, he's in the newsletter every Thursday as well. Is going to be on. We're going to talk about the Brandon Ingram fit in Toronto. He's very bullish on it compared to most. Looking forward to that one with Mike, who's a genius. And we'll obviously build up as we head towards the weekend as well. And the Raptors taking on the Heat to get back in action on Friday. Until then, thanks so much for hanging out. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye. Whoa. Not even. I've totally gone cold. It's terrible.